fake drugs called growing global menace. Now, what do we mean by fake drugs? Growing global menace. You may not know it, but many of the medications that you buy are coming from bootleg laboratories. I learned this a long, long time ago, that you often get what you pay for, especially when it comes to medication. I learned it when I was in grad school, and I was working for a pharmacologist who had come from one of America's great research corporations, a legitimate firm, I mean a big company. He was director of research. He told me that, for example, Bayer aspirin is clearly the best there is. The quality control was different than the knockoff, generic brands. The same is true, by the way, with generic drugs. You may not know this. There's been a lot of talk about it, but most of you don't know that generic drugs are not the same as the designated branded drug. They're not just the same and cheaper. They're made differently, the standards are different, and the quality control is much different. And that's why I actually, when I get a prescription, which is very rare, I always insist upon the designated name brand rather than the equivalent. I won't take the equivalent, whether it be a simple drug or an aspirin. So fake drugs cause real concerns for officials. Not convinced that Americans are prepared to slow down in their pursuit of buying cheaper merchandise online, a coalition of government officials and private industry executives met at the White House today to address the broad range of problems associated with the sales of counterfeit products. So now listen to this. Victoria Espinel, the Obama administration's intellectual property czar, estimated that 1/6 of all Americans who bought drugs online did so without a prescription. Now, I don't know which side she's on, truthfully, but I could care less. I don't like czars. They should all be fired, by the way. However, I believe that we should absolutely not buy counterfeit drugs. I think that the government has an obligation to tell people that counterfeit drugs are dangerous. I think it's very important that people understand that legitimate pharmaceutical operations are entitled to a profit, and that since it costs about $1 billion the last I checked to take a drug all through the legislative process, the testing process, etc., to become a legitimate drug, I think a major corporation has the right to recover profits from their medications. And what better evidence is there that we haven't seen Cuba produce one medicine for the world? I know you say, oh, well, socialized medicine is so wonderful. Cheaper drugs are so great. Let's get everything for nothing. Really? And where do you think your next breakthrough medication is going to come from? Cuba? North Korea? Syria? It's not going to come from those countries. In order to create breakthrough medications that all of us seem to want so badly, corporations have to invest in them. Many of you don't understand this because you have never owned a business. You've never had the audacity to invest money in creating a product or a service. So you don't understand what it takes to create a vegetable stand, let alone a prescription drug. So when I hear the profits are too high in the pharmaceutical industry, I totally disagree. Now, I've also argued that there are too many prescriptions in some areas, and I've said that. For example, I believe that the creation of these categories of to sell drugs to children as young as 2 years old, and I think that's a crime. That doesn't mean that all pharmaceuticals are criminal and that all pharmaceutical companies are not entitled to a profit. There's two different subjects here, by the way. But the problem of fake drugs, we read, also extends to the legitimate pharmacies. And they quote a music professor who told the audience how he unwittingly bought bogus drugs from his local chain drugstore. You hear, chain drugstore. He said the drug, which he had previously used without problem, suddenly caused a terrible burning sensation. So he asked his pharmacist about the situation and was told, you may have gotten the fake stuff. It turned out that multiple batches of cooked-up powder disguised as medication infiltrated the legitimate supply chain and was not discovered until the fake meds reached the consumer. You hear this? Now, how did that happen? How does it happen that fake drugs can wind up inside a legitimate pharmaceutical chain? How does that happen? Well, I don't know how it happened. I believe that it happens because either the pharmaceutical chains themselves are involved with the fake drug manufacturers and are trying to make a bigger profit, or that the FDA inspectors are being paid off to let this go unnoticed. But all I can tell you is that I think the simplest way to beat this, and there's no guarantee, by the way, anymore, the world is so filled with counterfeits. If they can counterfeit a diamond, which they can do, how many diamonds are out there in the world that are fake and you don't even know it? You may be wearing a diamond you think is real, it could be a fake. You wouldn't even know it, would you? We're not experts. How would you know? How would you know anymore? With fake art, with fake presidents, with fake pharmaceuticals, with fake war heroes, with fake degrees. How would you know if you're even getting a legitimate drug anymore, even if it says Pfizer on it? How do you know if the Viagra that you're using wasn't made by some shyster in a basement in Syosset, Long Island, with a pill pressing machine that he bought when he was thrown out of the vitamin business, and he went to a prison for 2 months? That he converted his pill presser from making vitamin C into making a fake Viagra. How do you know? I don't know anymore. That's why I don't take them if I can avoid them. We're living in the ersatz world where everything is collapsing around us for a million reasons. That's called corruption. That's all in plain English. This is called corruption. You have a corrupt, I already went down the list. Everything is ersatz. An ersatz president who you know is faking it. Ersatz, everything is like created. Everything's created. So you people don't know which way to turn. None of us do. So we go back to the basics. We eat comfort food. We, like the sale of beer, for example. During the Great Depression, the sale of beer went up and the sale of smoking tobacco went up. Why? Because people needed a relief from the pressures of a down economy. So now you have a government that has driven cigarettes, for example, into oblivion. You can't smoke. It's evil. They took them out of prisons. I mean, what is a prisoner supposed to do who relied upon cigarettes to relax? Well, take a guess what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to go to the quack doctor in the prison, and they're supposed to say they need a medication, and so the prisons are now floating in sedatives provided by drug companies that do billions of dollars with prisoners, whereas in the past, the prisoner might have smoked a cigarette. Now the prisoner now has to go and get a Xanax or something, or Prozac. Take a look at our military. Do you know that a large percentage of our people serving overseas are drugged on psychiatric drugs? How is this possible? How can you fight a war if you're on a medication? You forbid the guys to have a drink before going into battle because you're afraid that they'll make a mistake or they won't shoot straight? Well, you're right, probably. I'm not even sure that's correct. Because as a matter of fact, during many, many wars, the men took a drink before being forced to charge into a hail of bullets. Kind of made sense to me that if you carried a whiskey flask and you were on the front in a trench and the guy blew a whistle and you had to get up and you'd get shot in the back, it wouldn't have been a bad idea to take a swig out of the brandy flask before you met your maker. But now, no, you have to take a swig of the chemical that was manufactured by some manufacturer in Washington in order to make certain that the machine of the government, the pharmaceutical medical complex keeps rolling on. So that's it so far. It's the state of the world as one man sees it. I hope you've not enjoyed the show, because if you have, you're a very sick puppy indeed.